Jonathan Taylor. According to Ben Solak over at ESPN, the Bears are already in the mix for the $42 million running back, and in a minute I'll break down why this move could be the ultimate weapon for Caleb Williams, Ryan Poles' most expensive mistake in years. Because while Chicago's dreaming on Taylor, Kevin Warren spoke yesterday in Lake Forest, per the Chicago Tribune, and dropped a line that changes the entire stadium picture. And I'll tell you why his World Cup excuse just doesn't hold up, and to close it out, something that's gonna sting. Kevin Byard, the safety Poles let walk this offseason, just cracked the NFL top 100 as a Patriot. What his rivals are saying about him on that list is gonna make you question every move Poles has made this season. Bear down, fam, because Halas Hall is running 3 chess games at once right now, and we're breaking down all 3, starting now. Okay, let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, and I want to be honest from the first sentence. This is not yet a report from Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport. This is a bold prediction from Ben Solak at ESPN, part of a list of 10 moves he believes will happen during the 2026 season. That matters, and I'm telling you before I get excited, because you need to understand the difference between a rumor with a confirmed reporter's name attached versus the well-reasoned opinion of an analyst. That said, the substance here is juicy, so let's dig in. Who Jonathan Taylor is, and why any GM in the league would pick up the phone. Taylor entered the league in 2020 as a second-round pick out of Wisconsin, and since then he has been, when his body allows it, one of the most complete running backs in modern football. He led the league in rushing yards in 2021 with 1,811 yards. In 2025, with the Colts, he carried the ball 323 times for 1,585 yards and 18 touchdowns, adding 46 receptions for 378 more yards. Those are not the numbers of a complimentary back. Those are the numbers of a runner who carries an entire offense. In 2023, he signed a 3-year extension worth $42 million, with $26.5 million guaranteed. That contract put him at the time near the top of the position, though the running back market has moved quite a bit since then. Today, Taylor averages $14 million a year, which places him 7th among the highest paid running backs in the league, behind names like Saquon Barkley, who averages $20.6 million. He enters 2026 in the final year of that deal, with a base salary of almost $12 million and no extension on the table yet, and here's the detail that makes this real, instead of just summer speculation. Taylor, in his own press conference during Indianapolis minicamp, said he wants to be a Colt for life. That sounds nice. But, and this already burned me once before with other players who say the same thing before September, loyalty statements in June mean absolutely nothing if the team is not willing to pay, and that's where the uncomfortable part of this story comes in. Why the Colts might actually sell Indianapolis already spent big on Daniel Jones, already spent on Alec Pierce, and the organization, under a recent ownership change, still hasn't put a new number in front of Taylor. In the language of any NFL front office, that's a signal. If they truly wanted to extend him before the season starts, they probably would have done it already, because negotiations like this don't get resolved overnight, and July is already well underway. On top of that, Taylor has 1,738 career touches since 2020, the 3rd highest total among all skill position players over that span. That's real wear and tear. He turns 28 in January. Running backs, with rare historical exceptions, start showing physical decline right in that age window, so if Indianapolis believes 2026 could be a rebuilding year, moving him now for draft capital instead of losing him for nothing in 2027 free agency is mathematically the more logical move for a front office thinking long-term. Solak projects the trade gets done before the regular season trade deadline in November, not now in July. And honestly, that timeline makes sense with how these moves usually play out. Teams rarely move pieces of this caliber in preseason. They wait to see how the year starts, and then decide whether to sell or buy. Why the Bears make sense as a buyer. And here's the part that genuinely gives me chills as a fan. Chicago's rushing attack led the league in success rate last season. That's not a small detail, man. That means Chicago's offensive line, under Ben Johnson's scheme, is already generating consistent running lanes, the kind that a second-tier back simply cannot fully take advantage of. Now imagine putting someone with Taylor's explosiveness into that same scheme. Right now, Chicago runs with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. Swift had a solid 2025 season, but the word that keeps coming up next to his name is inconsistent, and his injury history is already a pattern, not an accident. Monangai is a back that Chicago fans genuinely like, a direct physical runner who reliably picks up yards after contact, but nobody honestly sees him as the centerpiece of a 10-plus carry a game offense for a team trying to fight for a Super Bowl. And here's where I have to be transparent with you about something almost nobody is saying. The Denver Broncos are also mentioned in this Taylor conversation, and they already extended J.K. Dobbins with a 2-year deal this offseason. That, in theory, should take them out of the conversation as a serious buyer, because it doesn't make sense to spend draft capital on a running back when you already invested in the position. But the report leaves the door open, suggesting Denver could still want to reinforce the running back room mid-season if Dobbins underperforms or gets hurt. Honestly, honestly, compared to Denver, Chicago's need here is clearer and more urgent. Chicago does not have an elite back locked up long term. Denver just committed to one. That's the real difference between the two teams in this conversation, and that's why I think if anyone pays the price for Taylor in November, it makes more sense that it's Chicago. The price and the condition for this to happen, Ryan Poles doesn't give anything away for free, and honestly, I don't think he should. A future first-round pick is the kind of currency Indianapolis would need to see on the table to justify moving their best running back in the middle of a relative contention window. And here's my genuine doubt, the one I want to share with you instead of selling you a certainty I don't have. Is it worth it for the Bears to spend that kind of capital on a position that, historically, this organization has managed to fill with middle-round picks? Poles built his offensive line and found Monangai in the late rounds. This front office's philosophy up to now has been to never overpay at running back. Bringing in Taylor would break that pattern. My honest position is this: if the Bears start the season as a real contender, with Caleb Williams playing at the level we all expect, and if Swift shows signs of physical fragility again before the October deadline, then yes, I see Poles picking up the phone. But if the Bears start well and Swift stays healthy, this conversation cools off fast, because you don't spend a first-round pick on a position that's already working reasonably well inside your scheme. Watch how this connects to what's coming next, because while we're all talking about whether the Bears will spend draft capital on a star running back, the organization still has a much bigger, much more expensive problem unresolved, and it has to do with where in the world this team is going to play 5 years from now. Chris Plotchick of the Chicago Tribune covered an event yesterday in Lake Forest called Talking Football with Kevin Warren, and honestly, after reading the full quotes, I was left with the feeling that the Bears president talked a lot and said very little. Here's what he actually did say, and there's real substance in it, or even wrapped in corporate language. Warren repeated once again that the franchise needs tax certainty before committing to any site. To paraphrase his comments, he said they've always been clear that they need that certainty because the numbers are too big without it, and that they need an infrastructure commitment and a good partner, because no matter where they build, there are always going to be complications. Now, let me translate this from public relations language into plain talk. Tax certainty is the fancy way of saying, I want a tax break, and I want it in writing before I sign anything. The Bears paid more than $197 million for the 326-acre property at Arlington Park, and ever since, they've been pushing month after month for favorable tax exemptions on that property. I'm not saying it's wrong for a company to negotiate its taxes. That happens on every big development project in the country. But let's be honest with each other. It's hard to feel too much sympathy for a multi-billion-dollar entity asking for a tax break while the cost of taking a family of 4 to a game remains, frankly, outlandish. The pattern we should already recognize, and here's where I want to name something directly, because we've already seen this before from this organization. Warren has spent months promising clarity by late spring and then by early summer, and here we are mid-July with no concrete announcement. That's not bad luck. That's a communication pattern where soft deadlines get set, those deadlines pass without consequence, and then the next soft deadline gets set. If this were the first time, I'd let it go. But we've long since lost count of how many times this franchise has said soon without soon ever arriving. Meanwhile, and this is actually new information, the organization keeps doing its homework on the project in Northwest Indiana. That confirms something a lot of analysts, myself included in past episodes, have been suspecting. Arlington Heights is not dead, but it's also not the only table the Bears are sitting at negotiating. Northwest Indiana remains a real active alternative, not a bluff to pressure Illinois. The World Cup comment. Honestly, a little ridiculous. Now, the part that made me laugh a bit, and I want to be transparent about my opinion here because I think it's worth saying. Warren expressed disappointment that Chicago wasn't a host site for 2026 World Cup matches, mentioning that other cities like Seattle, Texas, Miami, Boston, and New York got matches, and that not having a fixed roof at the current stadium contributed to that decision. Look, I understand the underlying argument. A dome gives the city flexibility for events that an open-air, cold-weather stadium can't offer as easily. That's a legitimate point in favor of the Arlington Heights project, but saying the lack of a fixed roof was the reason Chicago got left out of the World Cup sounds strange when Soldier Field already hosted World Cup matches back in 1994. No roof, no dome, no problem. The New York Times already reported in detail on the real reasons behind that decision, and they don't seem to boil down only to the roof structure. So when Warren uses that argument to justify the urgency of the dome, to me it sounds more like public relations than an honest breakdown of why Chicago got left out. What actually is a real signal: the sponsors. There's one detail Plotchick reported that I do think is genuinely significant. The organization has already narrowed its list of candidates for stadium naming rights down to 50 Fortune 500 companies that, in Warren's words, fit the mold of the Bears. That's not empty language. That means there's concrete work happening behind the scenes on the sponsorship side, which suggests that no matter where the stadium ends up getting built, the organization is already moving forward on the business side of the project as if construction were a certainty, not a possibility. And that's the connection I want you to see. While Poles is weighing whether to spend spend draft capital on star running backs to fight for a Super Bowl this season or the next. Warren is building the commercial infrastructure of a stadium that doesn't even have a confirmed location yet. It's the same organization playing two completely different chess games at the same time, one on the field and one in the real estate office, and neither one has a clear closing date yet. But while the front office keeps tangled up in its own real estate chess match, on the field there was a personnel move most fans had already forgotten about, and it came back into the conversation today for a reason that, honestly, should make us a little uncomfortable. I'll close with something shorter, but it hit me harder than I expected when I read it. Kevin Byard, the safety the Bears let walk this offseason, just landed at number 61 on the NFL's top 100 players list for 2026 as a Patriot, not as a Bear. We owe the story its full context. Byard had a historic 2025 season with Chicago, led the entire league in interceptions with 7, earned his spot in the Pro Bowl, and received first-team All-Pro honors. For a veteran safety, that year was an outlier in the best way, probably the best individual season of his career wearing a Bears jersey. Ryan Poles at the time publicly said Byard was one of the leaders on our team and that they were interested in bringing him back. To paraphrase the idea, he said they'd start with their own players before going into free agency. And yet, Byard ended up signing a one-year, $9 million deal with New England. $9 million, man. For the best safety in the league the previous season, by the most obvious metric there is, leading the NFL in interceptions. Now, the quotes accompanying his top 100 inclusion are genuinely glowing. Cameron Bynum, safety for the Colts, said Byard is playing right now like the best safety in the league, specifically mentioning 2 interceptions with hand skills he called insane. Jonas Sanker of the Saints added that if everybody knew how to do what he does, everybody would do it, referring to how fast he processes plays. And even Brock Bowers, the star tight end for the Raiders, an offensive player praising a defender, said Byard robbed him of several short routes in a game between the two teams. Those are not filler quotes, those are rival players from both sides of the ball, recognizing a specific player by name with concrete examples. That's worth more than any algorithm-generated ranking. The polls pattern we can no longer ignore, and here, honestly, I have to be critical, because this is not an isolated case. Polls has shown year after year a real willingness to let historic production walk when the number on the spreadsheet doesn't match his roster-building philosophy. We saw it with DJ Moore, we're seeing it again with Byard. The question I keep asking myself, and I could be wrong about this, is whether that financial discipline is eventually going to cost more than it saves, especially at a position like safety, where experience and play recognition matter just as much as physical traits. That said, I want to be fair to the other side of the argument, because criticism without context doesn't help anybody either. The Bears didn't walk away empty-handed. They signed Kobe Bryant, formerly of the Seahawks, on a 3-year, $40 million deal, a player who can also play slot and already won a Super Bowl ring, and in the draft they took Dylan Theineman in the first round, who according to ESPN reports is already working in with the first team defense during minicamp, soaking up knowledge from Bryant and from Elijah Hicks in the secondary. That's a defensible bet. Trading proven experience for a mix of a ring-bearing veteran and high-ceiling young talent. My honest opinion, to be completely transparent, I understand the financial logic of letting Byard walk. $9 million against $40 million spread over 3 years, plus a first-round pick is, on paper, a defensible bet on the future. But as a fan, watching a player who led the league in interceptions in our jersey end up on the top 100 wearing a different uniform, while we're betting on a rookie with 0 NFL experience yet, is the kind of thing that feels wrong in your gut, even when the spreadsheet says it was the right call. And that's everything for today, fam. If we connect all 3 stories, here's the picture that's left. Ryan Poles is willing to spend serious capital chasing star running backs like Taylor when the roster needs it, but he's also willing to let proven production like Byard's walk when the financial number doesn't convince him. It's the same philosophy, applied in opposite directions. Spend where there's a clear advantage, save where there's overpay risk. And meanwhile, Kevin Warren keeps playing his own game with the stadium, promising clarity that still hasn't arrived, while quietly building the commercial side of a project that doesn't even have a confirmed address. I could be wrong about several of these reads, honestly. The Taylor conversation is still a columnist's prediction, not a confirmed report. But if there's one thing that's clear to me after putting this video together, it's that this organization is making big decisions on 3 different fronts at the same time, and none of the 3 have a guaranteed closing date yet. Bear down always. Tell me down in the comments, if you had to pick just one, would you rather Poles spend the first round pick on Taylor, or keep Swift and Monangai and save that capital for the defensive line? I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.